the renovation cost a bit, but this house is in your name, right? Sorry, but could you please take care of this payment? Laughing without showing a hint of apologetic look, my mother-in-law added, "Oh, by the way, it's $79,800. What? Renovation cost. The house's name. $79,800. I felt a shock as if hit on the head by these sudden words, my legs shaky and unstable. Speechless and stunned, I stared at my mother-in-law's mocking smile. The moment I caught sight of my husband, Kevin, my feet naturally moved towards him. With a faint hope that he would be on my side, I relayed to Kevin exactly what his mother had said. I waited desperately for his response. However, all Kevin said was, "Well, that's pretty much it. Please take care of it. My name is Tracy. I'm a 26-year-old office worker living in a nature-rich area just outside the city center. Recently, I've started drawing illustrations as a hobby. Initially, I only decorated my room with my artwork. But after casually posting them on social media, I began receiving comments. Now, checking these comments has become a daily routine. I have a husband, Kevin, who is 3 years older than me. When we were searching for a house to live in after getting married, we wanted a quiet place and looked at properties away from the city center. It was then that we fell in love with this old traditional house at first sight, and decided to buy it for our married life. Buying this house was truly a good decision. It has become a precious space for me and Kevin. However, a frequent visitor, coming once a month since we started living here, has been a source of concern. Tracy. Hello? Open up, please. Hearing the relentless banging on the front door, I hurried to the entrance. Mother. I'm opening it now. Though the old house has a doorbell next to the door, I still force a smile and open the front door to find her bursting in. Really, there are so many bugs around here. Is Kevin at work today? Working even on a Saturday, that's tough. Oh, I've brought some food he likes. There she stood in the entrance, looking tired from the wait. This interaction has become a familiar routine, her carrying a big bag and talking non-stop. This troublesome visitor is none other than my mother-in-law. Since Kevin is an only child, naturally, she's been keen on taking care of him even after our marriage, bringing his favorite dishes every month and checking up on him. Tracy, let me show you how Kevin likes his seasonings. And about him. She instructs me in household matters, which is appreciated, but last month, she rearranged everything in the fridge to her liking. And the next morning, I had to start breakfast by searching for the ingredients. When we got married, Kevin said, if my parents ever need care, I would like them to live with us. Please be okay with that. I feel sad thinking about giving up this beloved old house if it comes to that. But I've resigned myself to the possibility. More than that, the thought of living with my mother-in-law all the time fills me with dread. And I feel sorry for Kevin. 2 years into our marriage in this traditional house, my father-in-law missed a step and broke his leg and hand. My parents are getting quite old, so I think they'll need our help from now on. As we talked about before our marriage, it's about time we start living together. Yes, I'm worried too, so that seems like a good idea. And I can still continue my hobby of painting, right? I was genuinely concerned about my father-in-law's health, so I quickly agreed to the idea of living together. However, I was anxious that the responsibilities of household chores and caring for my in-laws would leave me no time for my hobby of drawing illustrations. Kevin, seemingly unaware or indifferent to my concerns, simply said, I want you to prioritize the housework, and left for work. Left alone in the room, I felt a sense of resignation toward Kevin's self-centered thinking. I began to sort through my feelings while looking back at the illustrations I had drawn so far. But just as I had made up my mind about moving in together, an unexpected situation arose. I was working as usual at my job. Right after a major meeting had ended and I was about to take a break, I suddenly felt numbness in my hands and feet, followed by severe dizziness, and I collapsed on the spot. Fortunately, my life was not in danger, as my colleagues immediately called an ambulance. After undergoing tests, I was diagnosed with a young stroke, likely caused by my previously ignored high blood pressure. Though regretting my negligence was pointless now, the hospitalization, including detailed examinations, surgery, and rehabilitation, was expected to last about 3 months. The transition from diagnosis to hospitalization went smoothly, but I noticed a lack of concern from Kevin. After being diagnosed with a young stroke, I shakily took out my phone and called Kevin. All I heard from him was, "I see. Well, living together will have to be postponed then." His voice sounded more disappointed about the delayed living arrangement than concerned about my condition. I was speechless, not expecting him to be more worried about our future life with his parents than about my health. Since my father-in-law was still hospitalized with a fracture, I didn't have to worry about caregiving duties immediately and could focus on my recovery. Although Kevin and I don't have children, which was one less concern. Every time I met my in-laws, I remembered their eagerness to see their grandchildren. During my hospital stay, I often found myself reaching for the sketchbook beside me to distract from the image of my mother-in-law's face at those times. Lately, between preparing for the move-in with my in-laws and undergoing various tests after my collapse, I hadn't had time for my beloved illustrations. Once we started living together, I feared there would be even less time for my art. During my hospital stay, I considered this time as the last period of freedom given to me by God, and I decided to fully enjoy my hobby. I finished my paintings at a faster pace than usual. Once this period was over, I resolved to do my best in household chores for my husband, Kevin, and my in-laws. The 3 months of hospitalization flew by, and it was finally time for my discharge. Kevin contacted me, somewhat reluctantly, offering to pick me up. However, wanting to spend a little more time alone, I regretfully declined his offer. Reflecting on it, the 3 months in the hospital had passed in the blink of an eye. This might be my last chance to spend time on my hobby. As I rode the bus, trying to sort through my restless feelings, I noticed the familiar scenery outside the window and realized I was nearing home. The sun shone on the beautiful green leaves, making them sparkle. I felt indescribable emotions, thinking this might be my last goodbye to this nature-rich landscape. My in-laws' house, located relatively closer to the city center, would mean a completely different lifestyle than what I was used to. I truly loved spending time in this quiet place away from the urban noise. With a heavy heart, I slowly got off the bus at the familiar stop, approaching what was soon to be my former home. I stopped in my tracks at the sight that greeted me. Wait. My favorite old traditional house was supposed to be here. However, an unfamiliar house now stood in its place. Wondering if I had mistakenly gone to the wrong location due to my long hospital stay, I checked the surrounding buildings and the path I came from. But it wasn't a mistake. Is this our house? There was no point in wandering around confused, so I hesitantly pressed the doorbell of the house. A familiar voice answered, "Yes." It was unmistakably my mother-in-law's voice. Feeling disconnected from reality, I replied softly, "It's Tracy." The front door swung open, revealing my mother-in-law in her house clothes. "Oh, Tracy, welcome back. You're earlier than I thought. Kevin was supposed to pick you up since you must have a lot of luggage."
Uh,
Excuse me. Why has our house changed so much? I asked incredulously, interrupting my mother-in-law who was casually continuing the conversation while scratching her bed head. Ignoring my agitation, she said, "Tracy, why are you so flustered? Come in, this is your house too." Kevin. Tracy's back.
ah,
Welcome back. I was waiting, Kevin said, taking my luggage and inviting me inside. Why has the house changed like this? And why are you here, Mother? I demanded, unable to comprehend why our home had transformed. And why my mother-in-law was there. Kevin avoided giving a direct answer and opened an unfamiliar door, revealing the living room. I was shocked by the sight of the new sofa, dining table, kitchen. Everything was completely different from before. Then my mother-in-law, laughing, came into the living room and sprawled on the sofa, starting to watch TV. She laughed heartily, clutching her stomach. "Why are you in our house, Mother?" "Oh, Tracy. Why, you ask? Your hospital stay was long, wasn't it? I've been here helping out with the house and taking care of Kevin." I wondered if her helping out with the house meant doing household chores or something to do with the house's transformation. With a sinking feeling, I pressed her on why our traditional house had changed so much. Without any hint of guilt, she casually said, "Well, we're going to live together, aren't we? I just remodeled it into a two-family home, that's all." Her words about remodeling our house into a two-family home echoed in my mind. I never expected my mother-in-law, who always interfered in our lives, to go as far as remodeling our house without permission. The initial plan was to live with my in-laws in their house near the city center. My mother-in-law used to complain about the bugs and the walk from the station every time she visited our old traditional house. So why did it end up being decided that she would live here? I admit, at first, I was also dissatisfied with the bugs and the distance from the station. But, that was a mistake. What do you mean? You see, I was watching TV the other day and learned that my favorite celebrity lives quietly away from the city center. They said that while being far from the station can be inconvenient, walking is important for health, right? And lots of bugs just mean that nature is abundant. I want my future grandchildren to play and interact with nature. I was really impressed by that way of thinking. But I was never informed about living in this new house. And I really liked that traditional house. Even I, who used to say such things, have changed my mind. So, Tracy, your opinion will change too. I understand that traditional houses are stylish. But think about your old age. What? Living in a house with drafts like a traditional house is hard because it's cold. The heating and cooling aren't efficient either. And if the house isn't barrier-free, it'll be tough as you get older. What if your father gets injured again? My favorite life in the traditional house was gone due to my mother-in-law's self-centered thinking. Shocked and speechless, I was bombarded with more words from her. Oh, and here comes the important part. Turning off the TV she had been watching, my mother-in-law whispered to me with a smile. "The renovation cost a bit, but this house is in your name, right? Sorry, but could you take care of this payment?" Unapologetically laughing, she added, "Oh, by the way, it's $79,800. What? Renovation cost? The house's name. $79,800. I felt as if I had been struck on the head by the sudden words, and my legs trembled unsteadily. Speechless and stunned, I stared at my mother-in-law's mocking smile. The moment I caught sight of my husband, Kevin, my legs naturally moved toward him. Hoping he would be on my side, I told Kevin exactly what his mother had said. I waited for his response, clinging to a sliver of hope. However, Kevin's only reply was, "Well, that's pretty much it." Thanks. That's right. He's that kind of person. Even when I collapsed from a stroke, he first worried about our living situation and didn't show any concern for my health. He's the type who says white if his mother says black, and who would stop at blue and go at red if she said so. Mommy's always right. That's his belief. All the discomfort and dissatisfaction I had felt toward my husband came rushing out once I expressed them. I truly didn't care anymore. I'll cut ties with this family myself. All right, I understand. Kevin, I am divorcing you. And mother, please take care of the renovation cost yourself. I said everything in one breath and turned my back on them, stepping forward to leave this place. However, it seemed they weren't going to let me go that easily. Okay. I've been cold towards Tracy for a while now. Doesn't matter to me. Divorce? Sure. But you do know that since the house is in your name, you're responsible for the payment? Kevin's right. You can leave if you want, but make sure to pay the $79,800 first. I sighed deeply, exasperated by their selfish claims. I didn't look back, knowing they were probably smirking triumphantly. But I spoke out boldly without turning around. You keep saying the house is in my name, but Kevin, have you forgotten? The name was changed to yours. I revealed the truth. However, they laughed mockingly, probably thinking I was lying just to avoid paying. Tracy, what are you saying at this point?
Yeah.
Don't tell such blatant lies. We'll divorce, but only after you've paid the money. At that moment, I revealed how Kevin had asked for a change in the house's ownership name due to concerns about public perception. When we were getting married, I had no particular attachment to the house's name, so I readily changed it to his. Suddenly, the relaxed laughter of the two stopped, and I could sense panic setting in from behind my back. I don't remember saying such a thing. Besides, there's no proof, right? Anticipating this response, I turned around and walked past them to open a drawer in a shelf from our previous house. Let's see. It should be around here. Found it. This is the proof. I pulled out the document showing the property and house ownership, thrusting it in front of their faces, carefully pointing to the part where Kevin's name was listed. I emphasized, here. Can you read this? Look closely. Kevin's face turned pale the moment he saw the document. This is fraud. I never thought it was actually changed. Besides, $79,800. There's no way I can pay that. As soon as he realized he was liable for payment, Kevin started shouting loudly. His behavior resembled a child throwing a tantrum when things didn't go his way. Disgusted with his attitude, I decided to end the relationship. It seems a proper conversation is impossible here. From now on, let's handle everything through a lawyer. Mother, your son seems to be in quite a situation. I can't do anything more, so please take care of him from now on.
Goodbye.
I smiled at my stunned mother-in-law standing next to my ranting husband, turned my back, and left the house. After a while, I received a call from Kevin. Tracy, I'm sorry. Is there any way you could forgive me? Impossible. I can't forgive what you and your mother did to me. But why? Why? Kevin was sobbing on the phone. There's no point in talking with a child who can't have a proper conversation. Don't contact me again. If you have something to say, talk to my lawyer." With that, I hung up the phone. Despite a few more attempts to contact me, I ignored them and decided to communicate only through my lawyer. The divorce with Kevin went smoothly due to our previously strained relationship and the issues with the house. Additionally, the claim of fraud regarding the name change on the house was dismissed since it was done 3 years ago during our marriage with mutual consent. My lawyer assured me this is neither fraud nor anything else, which completely alleviated my worries. It turned out that the renovation costs for the house were supposed to be paid in full immediately after my discharge from the hospital. It was a well-thought-out harassment to push me into hell right after I had endured surgery and rehabilitation. Ultimately, since the house was in Kevin's name, the obligation to pay in full fell on him, leading to his own downfall. Moreover, he had to pay the compensation after our successful divorce. I had no interest in knowing about my ex-husband, who faced a huge sum of renovation costs and compensation. Later, I received an apology from my ex-father-in-law, who had been hospitalized with a fracture, saying, "I'm sorry for what my wife and son have done." He apparently had no involvement in this matter. However, despite everything that had happened, there was no change in the fact that for 2 years after our marriage, he had turned a blind eye to my ex-mother-in-law doing as she pleased, and to the cold attitude of my ex-husband. So I simply replied, "Understood," to his apology, fully cutting ties with that house and moving on to a new chapter in my life. Since then, my health has gradually improved, and I was able to return to work. I can now immerse myself in drawing illustrations whenever I like, which I used to do under my ex-husband's scrutiny. Originally just a hobby, I continued to share my illustrations on social media, which led to work offers. Now, I often draw more for work than as a hobby. I'm about to visit an old traditional house in a rural town. My dream is to buy an old house with the compensation from my ex-husband and my savings, create an environment where I can focus on painting, and eventually open a studio. I'm taking the first step towards that dream today. Riding the bus, I gaze out at the scenery and am reminded of that day of my discharge. The nature-rich view outside the bus window on the day my life dramatically changed is vivid in my mind. I feel cheerful and excited about my new life ahead, as the leaves of the trees shine brightly in the sunlight. My name is Kelly, I'm 23 years old. I'm a broadcaster at a local television station, living fulfilling days. I'm still a rookie caster, not only presenting news, but also learning about local specialties and attractions. There's so much I need to do. My family wholeheartedly supports and cheers for me. When I have work early in the morning, my mom wakes up at the same time and always makes sandwiches for me. My dad, despite being tired from work, waits up for me until I get home. I feel truly blessed to be born to my parents. But the one who dotes on me more than even their love is my older brother, Victor. Victor always checks out the programs I'm in and even records them. He repeatedly watches them, burns them onto DVDs, and gifts them to our relatives. I tell him, "It's embarrassing, stop it," but he responds, "But look, you're doing so well," and gets overly excited as if it were a school play. Outside home, Victor is a serious company employee. He's now the branch manager of a major travel agency, traveling not just across Japan but around the world. Since childhood, he's loved traveling and even went on a world tour alone as a student. Victor, kind, family-oriented, and handsome in both looks and heart, recently got a girlfriend. Their meeting happened during one of his beloved trips. The girlfriend, Jennifer, is a flight attendant. When Victor was on a flight, Jennifer tried to give him her phone number, but he didn't accept it. Months later, they met again on a plane. Victor was struck by how kindly Jennifer treated a young child on board. He approached her this time, they hit it off talking about travel, and eventually started dating. Our family was overjoyed. After all, Victor, despite being popular, never talked about girlfriends. As I mentioned before, he's not just my favorite, he's genuinely perfect. My friends would come over just to see him. Yet, we never heard any romantic rumors about him, which worried us. My mom would pester him daily, saying, "Oh, I want to meet her." At first, Victor was reluctant, saying it was embarrassing or she was busy. But he gave in to mom's persistence, saying, "All right, I'll bring her over on her day off." Then, our house became busy. Preparing meals, cleaning rooms, and Dad even thought about getting a new suit. Though Mom stopped him, saying it wasn't a matchmaking meeting. We never expected this happy event to turn into the worst one. On the day of meeting Jennifer, as we were nervously waiting, the doorbell rang. We all greeted Jennifer at the door. She was stunningly beautiful, radiating an aura. "Welcome." When they greeted her, Jennifer replied, "Thank you for inviting me today," very politely. Surprised, I blurted out, "Wow, amazing." Jennifer glanced at me and turned away. At that moment, I thought I had said something weird, but I didn't dwell on it much. However, it didn't take long to realize something was off about Jennifer. Even during dinner, while chatting merrily, she would smile only when the topic was about her or Victor's childhood. But whenever I was mentioned, her face would stiffen, and she'd try to change the subject. When Mother said, "The siblings are really close. Victor loves Kelly a lot," Jennifer's expression turned sour. Responding only with a curt, "Oh, is that so?" Probably Mom sensed something too. When Dad and Victor were drinking and having fun, I tried to bond with Jennifer, asking, "What are your hobbies?" She scoffed and said bluntly, "I don't want to tell you." When I was too scared to talk to her after that, she said, "Kelly, can you show me where the bathroom is? I don't know where the light switch is." I was startled. Victor offered to show her, but I was relieved when she said, "It's fine. Enjoy with your father." I intended to guide her quickly and escape, but she didn't let me. Suddenly she said, "You're a caster, right? You must be the center of attention now because you're young. How did you become a broadcaster? Through monkey business?" "No." With that figure and face, I guess monkey business is out of the question. The bathroom is here. The light switch is here. I cut her off and returned to my room. Mom came to check on me, wondering why, but I said, "I have early work tomorrow, I need to prepare." She didn't seem convinced, but didn't press further. I was torn about confiding in my mother. Hearing the laughter from the living room, I didn't want to ruin Victor's happiness. I couldn't bring myself to tell her that day. Jennifer started visiting our home often. She'd bring gifts for my parents and chat animatedly about her flights. My parents, who love traveling, really enjoyed these conversations. As for me, our interactions were limited to greetings. Sometimes Dad would invite me to join them, but Jennifer would glare at me and, when Dad left, would sarcastically say, "Ugh." My mood's dropping. "Do you think you've won just because you're a broadcaster? Why? What did I do? Why do I have to endure this?" While I was pondering this, Victor and Jennifer's wedding was decided. I couldn't genuinely congratulate them. But it was Victor's decision. I had no right to interfere. I forced a smile and said, "Congratulations." Jennifer's reaction was as lukewarm as expected, but then something unexpected happened. Victor suddenly asked, "Kelly, can you host our wedding?" I was surprised, and so was Jennifer. Kelly and Jennifer's voices synced up. Why? Because Kelly is a broadcaster, she's good at this kind of thing, right? She knows me well. I'd be really happy if Kelly hosted, my brother Victor said with a beaming smile. Hesitating, I said, no, but... Then Jennifer, subtly opposing, said, shouldn't we hire a professional? Isn't Kelly a professional too? Jennifer, do you not want Kelly to host? It's not like that. Jennifer was speechless. She couldn't badmouth me in front of my brother since she always acted nice around him. Brother, are you sure you want me? I want you to do it, Kelly. Think of it as your brother's once-in-a-lifetime request. Will you do it for me? I usually ask Victor for favors, so when he asked me like this, I impulsively said, yes, I'll do it. Then I prepared various things for the wedding. I talked to Victor's friends, colleagues, Jennifer's parents, friends, and colleagues, packing my head with different stories. I also prepared a surprise, just in case. Finally, the wedding day arrived. The reception started with my announcement, the bride and groom, please enter. Victor looked his best and happiest ever. Jennifer was stunning, shining brightly. The guests, noticing I was a caster, watched my amateur hosting warmly. Some even came to take pictures with me, which I accepted, though reluctantly. I pretended not to notice the one person who was displeased. The ceremony went smoothly with performances and the cake cutting. And then it was time for Jennifer's final speech. Now, let's have the speech. Jennifer stood up and walked slowly to the microphone. Everyone, holding handkerchiefs, focused on her. Then, Jennifer said something no one expected. Before I start my speech, first, could the monster please leave? She said it clearly, looking only at me. Everyone was shocked. As they were trying to understand what happened, she said again, pointing at me, what? You didn't hear? Monster, please leave. Monster? Who? Why do I have to be looked down on like this? My brain, which had stopped thinking, started racing, and anger welled up inside me. I had been patient until now, but this wasn't helping my brother. It's time to reveal her true nature. Taking a deep breath, I said, understood. No second words. I was about to leave when a conversation played at just the right moment. You'll miss your chance to get married with that attitude. You're only young, nothing else. With your looks, you. The hall erupted in chaos. It was clearly Jennifer's voice. She screamed, stop it. If you tell Victor about me, I'll destroy you. Despite Jennifer's cries, the conversation continued. Jennifer, is this you? You said such things to my dear sister? No. It's not true, Victor. It must be Kelly trying to sabotage our marriage. Jennifer clung to Victor crying, but he shrugged her off. Kelly would never do such a thing. Don't insult me. It was a voice I had never heard from Victor. Tension filled the hall, and everyone felt the unbearable atmosphere. Listen carefully, Jennifer. My mother, taking the microphone, spoke as if advising Jennifer. Jennifer was too panicked to listen, but Mom didn't care. Jennifer, ever since you first came to our house, I noticed something was off with Kelly. I asked her about it, but she wouldn't say anything. However, I heard it. You've been hurling heartless words at Kelly, haven't you? No, it's not like that, Mother. She denied it in a barely audible voice. Every time you called me Mother, it made me uncomfortable. Kelly once went to ask your colleagues at work about you. But hardly anyone had good things to say about you. Especially to the younger and cuter juniors, you were particularly harsh. Also, it's fine to have ex-boyfriends, but I heard you always broke up because of your affairs. Always looking down on others, thinking you're a queen? I refuse to have someone like you marry my son. The mother's tone started off calm but gradually became stronger. Of course, the ceremony was interrupted, and only Jennifer, sitting down with her mother consoling her and her father yelling at her, remained in the hall. After that, when we returned home from the ceremony, Victor apologized to me. I didn't want an apology from him, but he was so insistent that I said, "Okay, then buy me some delicious chocolate next time." I also apologized to Victor, "Sorry, I couldn't speak up." Victor patted my head and said, "Kelly was enduring it for my sake, right?" Kelly is a kind girl, showing his usual gentle smile. The next day, Jennifer's family came to our house, but my father rejected them, saying, "I don't even want to see your faces." Since my mother, who knew the situation, had told Victor to submit the marriage registration after the wedding, we were spared the hassle of divorce proceedings. So, we'll likely never see that family again. Of course, Victor's anger didn't subside so easily. Working at a major travel company, he almost stopped using the airline Jennifer worked for. The airline already had a poor reputation for customer service and had failed to improve despite repeated requests. This incident was the last straw. The decrease in contracts from Victor's company and the issues of her bullying juniors becoming public worsened Jennifer's reputation at work. Eventually, she lost her place in the company and resigned. I heard later that Jennifer was jealous of me being younger and was unhappy about Victor's affection for me. She always had to be the best and the main character in her life, so it must have been humiliating for her. Such actions wouldn't increase Victor's affection for Jennifer, but she was too foolish to realize that. Additionally, Jennifer's parents suffered because of her. They had to cover the cost of the wedding and the settlement for the bullying, amounting to several tens of thousands of dollars. Jennifer, with her high pride, showy possessions, and spending habits, had almost no savings. Her parents, unable to forgive her, kicked her out of the house. From my perspective, covering several tens of thousands of dollars for her was already too lenient. But her family's affairs are none of my concern. As for our family, Victor focused more on his work and finally got promoted to area manager. I was worried his rapid career advancement might distance him from women. But it seems unnecessary, as he's getting along well with a former girlfriend he met at a reunion. She was a senior in my club and I know her character well, so I'd be happy if she became his girlfriend. As for me, I'm still working hard as a broadcaster. I've been entrusted with a big project and am focusing on that these days. Being able to concentrate on work is thanks to my supportive family. And most importantly, all the problems caused by Jennifer have been resolved, which is a huge relief for me. I once visited Jennifer's former company for an interview, and a junior she had mistreated spoke to me. According to her, Jennifer, unable to forget her glory days at the airline, sometimes visits the airport and causes trouble. She might get banned from the airport if she continues. This year-end, our family plans to go on a trip using a plan Victor made. If he and my former club senior are dating by then, I'd like to invite her and enjoy a spa together, but that's still a secret from Victor. Our family has many joys awaiting us. My name is Tiffany, and I currently live with my husband, Andrew. I am 45 years old now, but I went through a divorce with my previous husband when I was 40. The reason for that divorce was essentially because I reluctantly accepted my previous husband's unilateral desire to divorce. Since we had no children together and I didn't have a good impression of my previous husband, I saw it as a fortunate opportunity and agreed to the divorce. However, during that time, my previous husband said to me, "Who would want a leftover woman at 40? You'll just spend the rest of your life alone and miserable." Oh, and since I've been supporting you up until now, There's no need for any division of assets, right? To think a woman abandoned by me could end up so pitiful. His mocking words completely dried up any feelings I had for him. I was ashamed to have spent so many years with such a man. Yet, sometimes remembering his words spurred me on, determined not to end up as he said. While living with my previous husband, Scott, I hardly wore makeup because he would say, makeup is just a waste. I only wore the bare minimum for work. Now that I'm in an environment where no one complains about what cosmetics I buy, I've started to buy makeup and go to beauty salons to regain my sense of self. Looking back, Scott, despite us both working, acted as if he was the only one earning and forced all household chores on me, acting superior. I was not fond of Scott, but having lost my parents early and with no relatives to speak of, he was the only one I could rely on in times of need. Well, even if I had collapsed from overwork, Scott would probably have just scoffed and abandoned me. Regardless, not wanting to be alone, I stayed by Scott's side for many years. Scott knew I wouldn't leave, which probably encouraged him to take me for granted and order me around as he pleased. And when he got bored of me, he left me. However, his predictions did not come true. I am now married to Andrew, whom I met 2 years ago, and am walking through my second life with him. Andrew is 2 years older than me. I heard that he hadn't remarried since his previous wife passed away from illness. He showed me a photo of his late wife, who was very beautiful and looked nothing like me. When I asked Andrew why he married me, someone who looks nothing like her, he said, if she resembled my late wife, it would just remind me of her. I'd feel like I'm betraying her. That made sense. Thus, he decided to marry someone completely different from his late wife. Knowing that it wasn't just because I didn't resemble his late wife that he chose me, I wasn't upset. Andrew and I met at a marriage matchmaking party for people over 40. I spoke with various people, but I didn't find anyone particularly enjoyable to talk to. After speaking with a few men, getting lectured about their beliefs, or being told they didn't like aged women, I was exhausted. It seemed to me that the reason these people weren't married was exactly because of their off-putting attitudes. I wanted to retort that they were of similar age when they complained about women being old. Eventually, while sitting in a corner of the venue, Andrew came and sat near me on a bench in the same corner. Are you tired? Yes, a bit. It's quite exhausting to talk with so many people here. I agree. I'm a bit tired myself. This seems like a good spot to take a break. Andrew mentioned he was running a company and had struggled with its management. Since his wife passed away, he hadn't remarried until now. There seemed to be many women attracted to the title of company owner. Even when Andrew sat near me, women came from the center of the venue to approach him. Then, Andrew said, I'm currently speaking with this lady, so please do not disturb us. With a smile, effectively turning the woman away. After a moment, I realized he was referring to me. Andrew apologized to me, saying, I'm sorry if it seemed like I was using you. But I understood his concerns, so I told him, feel free to use me as much as you want. Then, he laughed with surprise. After that, we shared our stories. Why we were attending a matchmaking party. And why I had been divorced by my previous husband, Scott. I also mentioned that I was looking for a partner because I didn't want to prove my ex-husband right. But it's kind of strange to be looking for a life partner with such a mindset, isn't it? It could be a nuisance to the other person. Really, participating in a matchmaking party with such an impure motive. Then, how about using me? What? Andrew smiled warmly at me. There's nothing wrong with getting married for competitive reasons. I realized at some point how lonely being alone made me feel. And I started looking for someone to marry. If you say your motive is impure, then mine is impure too. while thinking that not wanting to be alone isn't necessarily an impure motive. I laughed, appreciating his attempt to encourage me. I see. Is it okay if I use you, then? Of course. I think you still don't know much about me. So how about we start with dinner together? That sounds like a great idea. After the matchmaking party, we went to his favorite Italian restaurant. The pasta he recommended was delicious. Andrew looked pleased as I happily enjoyed the meal. We met several times after that. Andrew had married his previous wife when he was 20. It was a marriage while he was still a student. Shortly after graduating and finding employment, he started his own business. But around the same time, his wife fell ill and passed away. To forget his sorrow, Andrew threw himself into his work. As a result, he remained unmarried until now. Of course, I explained to him why I ended up divorced. Though my explanation was vague because I didn't fully understand why Scott suddenly wanted a divorce. I can't understand someone who would disregard and just throw away someone like you. But, as odd as it might sound, it was lucky for me that you got divorced. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to meet you. His words made me blush unexpectedly. I hadn't anticipated being told something like that. Being with Andrew made me feel like I was in love again, something I thought wouldn't happen again. It didn't take long for Andrew and me to get married. Our marriage has been very smooth. After marrying Andrew, I quit my job to focus on hobbies I had always been passionate about. Andrew told me when we got married, if you like your job, you can continue. I want you to prioritize what you want to do most. So, I quit my job to make the most of my life. Andrew praised me a lot as I diligently pursued my hobbies and took care of daily chores. He said, I used to rely on housekeeping services. But coming home to someone cooking is such a joy. And your cooking is delicious. He enjoyed my cooking with happiness. One day, while Andrew and I were out on a weekend, we were talking in a cafe when Andrew received a work call and excused himself from the table. As I waited for him, I suddenly heard someone say, "Isn't that Tiffany? What are you doing here, following me around?" I looked around and saw my ex-husband, Scott, in the aisle next to our table. Next to him was a young woman I didn't recognize, clinging to his arm. Seeing the young woman clinging to Scott, I thought to myself, it must be hard to walk with someone clinging to you like that. Scott, smirking at me, said, "You're still alone, aren't you? For a woman dumped by me to come to such a fancy cafe. You might spend a month's worth of food money here, right? Maybe you entered this cafe planning to dine and dash. That's not true at all. I intend to pay for my visit here." Even years after our divorce, Scott hasn't changed much from when he decided to leave me. His personality is as bad as ever, and he continues to mock me. Seeing the woman with him behaving this way, I couldn't help but think she was misguided too. But I responded to him calmly without showing any irritation. I wonder. After all, I dumped you because you were poor. While drinking my coffee, I listened to Scott. I didn't want to be ridiculed by him any further. But I was curious about the reasons he had for initiating our divorce. Having Andrew as a wonderful husband now, I felt confident in myself regardless of what Scott said. "When you were living with me, you couldn't earn much, could you? I always wondered how you could earn so little." "What do you mean?" "Scott and I both had jobs. I've seen his salary slips before, and as far as I could tell, there wasn't much difference between our earnings. I couldn't understand why he thought my earnings were low. But he boldly stated, "What I mean is, I dumped you because your annual income was $10,000. You don't understand that?" I was dumbfounded. As I was surprised, the woman listening to our conversation giggled and said, "Poor people deserve to be dumped." I understood they were mocking me, but their insult was based on a misunderstanding. Huh? That's the monthly rent, though. Both of them looked puzzled at my words. It seemed Scott had made a huge mistake. Well, thanks to that mistake, I was able to divorce him and marry Andrew, a wonderful husband. I told you when we got married, didn't I? I have rental income. That income was $10,000. Not from rental income. My salary from work was about the same as yours. Scott was gaping in disbelief at my words. The woman beside him, not understanding, asked Scott, "What's rental income?" Scott was too shocked to answer, so I explained to the woman in his place. I'm a landlord. I own apartments and buildings. And I collect rent from the tenants every month. That income is $10,000. And I also had a salary from my job back then. Huh? So you were earning more than Scotty? Scotty must be Scott. I wonder if he enjoys being called that by the young woman. Well, it's no longer my concern. Yes, that's right. The salary I received from our company was about the same as his. So, Scott dumped his ex-wife, calling her poor? That seems to be the case. The woman looked suspiciously at Scott, who, realizing he was being scrutinized, hastily said, No, that's not it. I dumped you because I couldn't stand your deterioration. You used to be beautiful, but you stopped trying to look good after we got married. It seemed he wanted to blame something other than financial reasons for the divorce. I sighed. I didn't stop trying to look beautiful. You were the one who forbade me from buying cosmetics. You also banned me from going to the salon. And even required your permission for me to get a haircut. How could I possibly maintain my beauty under those conditions? You wouldn't even let me take proper care of my skin.
Ew.
A guy who controls what cosmetics you buy is the worst. The young woman, now a few steps away from Scott. Apparently, Scott hadn't remarried yet. Had the woman been his wife, she would have known his true nature sooner. Lucky for her, she discovered it before marrying him. No, that's not true. I said you shouldn't wear makeup because you might cheat. Wearing makeup and going out means you want to show it to other men, right? Before I could respond, the young woman exclaimed in disbelief, as if makeup isn't for men, it's for me. Don't flatter yourself. It's awful to think that way. What era's mindset do you have? Stay away from me.
Goodbye.
It seemed she had had enough. Furious, she left Scott behind and quickly exited the cafe. I really wished Scott would leave soon. He was becoming a disturbance to the shop. As I started to drink my coffee again, perhaps panicked from being abandoned by the woman, he blurted out something outrageous to me. Then, let's get back together. What? I was astounded. Just because he was rejected by the woman didn't mean he could simply propose to reconcile with me. I was already happily married to Andrew. And I had never once considered getting back together with Scott. However, Scott smirked. You've been alone since we divorced, right? Living a lonely life? So, I'm offering to console you. I was dumbfounded. Before I could respond, I noticed Andrew, who had finished his phone call, standing behind Scott with an angry expression. Do you need something from my wife? Scott turned around in shock upon hearing Andrew's deep voice from behind. Wife? Yes, she is my cherished wife. Quite bold of you to hit on another man's wife. What? But she was my wife. Tiffany divorced her previous husband a long time ago. She is now in a marital relationship with me. You have no rights over a woman like Tiffany, whom you disparaged and discarded. We were enjoying a day out as a couple. You, being an outsider, should leave immediately. Scott was visibly flustered by Andrew's words. He had assumed I was still alone, but that was not the case. Feeling like I had triumphed over him gave me a sense of satisfaction. Then, Andrew stared intently at Scott, who seemed too intimidated by Andrew to move. Eventually, Andrew began. Now that I think about it, you're the person who came to our company for a sales pitch, aren't you? What could it be? The president. It appeared that Scott and Andrew had already met before, through work-related circumstances. Yes. I said we would consider whether to sign a contract with your company. But we will pass on making a contract with your company. A company that sends representatives who demean women in public is not one we can feel comfortable making a deal with. No, please. My sales have been falling recently. I don't have any options left. Please sign the contract. Andrew dodged Scott's attempt to plead further. Today is my day off. Could we not talk about work now? If you intend to continue bothering me and my wife, I will call the police. The mention of the police, and perhaps the realization that further pestering would only exacerbate his situation, led Scott to leave dejectedly. After sending Scott away, Andrew seemed a bit down, saying, "It's all because I was on a work call." But then brightened up. "You really saved me at just the right moment." He smiled happily. Later, I learned that Andrew had decided not to sign a contract with Scott's company. There were other companies offering similar terms. So he chose to make a deal with one of them instead. Somehow, the company found out about the unpleasant encounter with their employee during the president's day off, and Scott was relegated to a less influential position. Knowing that Scott is probably leading a lonely life still gives me a sense of relief. My name is Lucy, and I turned 40 this year. I've always loved makeup, so after graduating high school, I became a beauty staff member at a certain company. Thanks to my daily studies and efforts, I performed well at the company. But I wanted to make someone shine with my makeup. So I became an assistant to a famous makeup artist through an acquaintance's connection. During my training, I was unpaid and extremely busy. But gradually I became recognized for my skills. By the 4th year, I was earning a decent income. In between the busy times, I also studied hair makeup, which is why I think I was often called to various job sites, being able to handle anything. I met my husband Kevin, who was a photographer, at a photo shoot. We were both in training at the time and quickly understood each other. Soon started dating, and when he proposed, I immediately said yes. Looking back, I think I was young to make such a quick decision. I will never forget the surprise when I went to greet Kevin's parents at their home. It was a single-family house in a high-class residential area, like something out of a drama. Kevin, an only child from such a family, said, "They want me to take over the house, but I want to live freely." I was incredibly nervous. Not just about meeting his parents, but also about entering such a luxurious house. Surrounded by high-end furniture, I nervously greeted his parents in my best dress. My father-in-law, the president of a small to medium-sized company, gently smiled and said, "What a lovely person," but his eyes weren't smiling. On the other hand, my mother-in-law openly showed hostility towards me. "I know where you come from, but don't count on our wealth, okay?" Shocked by her words, Kevin kicked the heavy table and said, "We'll make it on our own. Leave us alone," then left the room. I hurriedly informed my in-laws that I was leaving and followed him. I still remember my mother-in-law sighing deeply as we left. So, we started a modest newlywed life without a ceremony, just registering our marriage. We both had jobs with irregular hours, so we didn't see each other much. But I tried my best to cook for him and keep the house tidy. As I started earning a decent income and his job went well, Kevin suggested moving to a better place to boost our luck. He bought a rental property costing $2,500 in a prime location. recommended by a senior successful photographer who was moving out. He believed moving there would improve our fortunes, as many celebrities and famous designers lived in that building. He also seemed to enjoy saying he lived in such a place. As someone frugal by nature, I initially refused, but he insisted, saying, "We can afford it if we both pay. Our work is about honing our sensibilities." So I reluctantly agreed to move. Looking back, I think he wanted to show his parents that we were doing well by moving to a good location. After moving, my work started to go really well, as if blessed. On the other hand, Kevin's laziness and quick temper, which had been problematic since the beginning, started to affect his work, and he began losing jobs. Instead of trying to improve, he lost motivation. Within the industry, it was whispered, "That's it, he's done for." Kevin, who always disliked appearing uncool, couldn't stand such a position and hastily declared, "I'm done with being a photographer," and promptly announced his retirement. Then, possibly having been advised by someone, he started working as a day trader. As a trader, he didn't have clients, but used his own savings to trade stocks. He was constantly checking stock prices and trading throughout the day. It seemed he wasn't particularly serious about it, as he only used 2 computer monitors. While I was busy running around outside, he was at home, leisurely watching stock prices and trading on his computer. Meanwhile, I became friendly with a celebrity and was offered to start a budget-friendly brand together. Having my makeup brand had been a long-term dream, so I boldly took the opportunity. Although I'm not comfortable being in the limelight, I supported the celebrity from behind the scenes while launching the brand. Thanks to her exposure and my steady sales efforts, the brand was a huge success. However, Kevin, who was idly spending his days at home, started saying nonsensical things like, "Ever since we moved here, you've been lucky, right? So, it's all thanks to me for suggesting we live here," and stopped paying the rent. Then he said, "My card has expired. Can you make me a family card?" So, to avoid him getting into strange debts, I easily agreed and made him a family card. But I set the limit to $3,000 to prevent him from overspending. Despite the current situation, I still believed he would make a comeback. Originally from a wealthy family, Kevin would only wear branded items and refuse to wear anything else. Our home's interior, decorated by him with items from famous designers, was beyond my understanding, but his friends were always impressed when they visited. It seemed he maintained his self-esteem by showing off the latest trendy items to his friends, despite his income clearly decreasing. Meanwhile, my responsibilities at work were increasing, and I spent my days just coming home to sleep, with no time to look after the house. Then, suddenly, my father-in-law passed away. We hadn't visited Kevin's parents since our first greeting, so there was no interaction. We didn't even see my father-in-law in his last moments and only attended the funeral. Seeing my mother-in-law breaking down in tears, both Kevin and I regretted not having been around before. So, when she said, "I don't want to live alone. Can I stay with you?" we couldn't refuse. Thus began our life living together, but my mother-in-law, completely different from her demeanor at the funeral, reverted to the same arrogant attitude she had shown when we first greeted her. She commented, "What a terribly small room this is. It feels suffocating," and asked, "Isn't there a bigger room available?" Soon, one of our 2 rooms was filled with her collection, leaving no space to walk. Then Kevin, seizing the opportunity, said, "Well, maybe we should move then. There's a perfect place I know of," and he introduced a property that cost $4,000 a month. I didn't want to increase the rent, but it seemed necessary for living with my mother-in-law. So, we moved to a 3-bedroom apartment. When I asked Kevin to pay rent, he replied indifferently, "You know I can't afford it right now." Despite the move being for his mother, he didn't seem to care. When I talked to my mother-in-law about rent, she responded irritably. Kevin told me he doesn't need to pay. Why are you, his wife, asking for it? Moreover, Kevin asked to increase the family card limit from $3,000 to $5,000, claiming it was necessary for his mother's needs. I firmly refused. Then my mother-in-law, influenced by whatever Kevin told her, confronted me. Lucy, I heard you're not giving Kevin any allowance? Shocked, I replied, that's not true, mother, but she didn't listen and started lecturing me. It seems you do give him some money, but he says it's not enough. Men have their needs. You must manage the household finances properly. Actually, I am the one who's really supporting our household right now. When I honestly explained our financial situation, she said shockingly, don't lie. A high school graduate with a lowly job like makeup can't afford a place like this. I heard you're a pathological liar when cornered, and it seems to be true. Kevin had told her I was a pathological liar. She believed everything he said and wouldn't listen to me at all. From then on, she started meddling in everything I did at home, imposing her standards. Kevin's already awake. It's common sense for the wife to wake up earlier. Not preparing breakfast, what kind of wife are you? Originally, our jobs required us to eat whenever we could. If we didn't, we couldn't survive. But since Kevin became a day trader, he had a more regular schedule. My life remained hectic, and to her, I probably seemed like a terrible wife who was always sleeping. Kevin didn't stand up for me but instead played the part of the dutiful husband, saying, "It's all right, mother. I'm fine." Yet, the truth was that it was I who was truly supporting the household. However, this just made my mother-in-law colder towards me. She had never liked me and often made derogatory comments. Please don't make so much noise with the dishes. This is what you get with someone of poor upbringing. Do you watch such worthless TV? You can't even read this word? Despite my success in my career, these constant barbs began to affect me mentally. Kevin, seeing this, would say indifferently, well, my mom was brought up as a lady. It can't be helped. I was confident in my makeup skills, but began to doubt myself in other areas of culture and knowledge, wondering if I didn't belong in this household. Unbeknownst to me, this was all part of Kevin's plan. I realized this when I heard from someone that Kevin was infatuated with a female entrepreneur, and rumors were circulating that he hoped to marry her. It seemed Kevin would prefer me to leave after a fight with my mother-in-law rather than risk a divorce and potential compensation for infidelity. He had been subtly turning my mother-in-law against me to cause strife between us. Realizing this, my dismay turned to disbelief. True, I had been too focused on work and neglected building a home. But seeing Kevin happy with expensive purchases was blissful for me. So earning money felt like protecting our happiness. Of course, seeing women become beautiful with the makeup tools I created was also a joy. That's why I worked hard. But Kevin had stopped seeing me as anything more than a convenient source of money. His displeasure at my refusal to increase his card limit was obvious. I hadn't intended to neglect him, but to him, it felt like disregard. This disappointed me deeply. My mother-in-law, as usual, nagged me about doing more housework. Who do you think allows you to live like this? Do you even understand your place as a wife? She followed me around the house, making me uncomfortable. I wondered how my life had come to this, feeling down every day. However, I wasn't a naive young girl anymore and had started taking measures to handle the situation. One day, my mother-in-law confronted me with some documents. Lucy, you don't do much housework because, as Kevin says, you're busy, but what's this? It was the tax return forms for the end of the fiscal year. As I stood there stunned, she took out the document and said, "This? A monthly income of $1,000? You claim to be so busy, yet you earn so little? Confused, I didn't respond immediately, so she continued, I'm just appalled. If only you earned a decent income suitable for our family. Acting so high and mighty, yet you barely take care of my son Kevin. As she spoke, her frustration boiled over, and she exclaimed, a daughter-in-law who earns only $1,000 a month is no family member. Leave this house immediately. Barely holding back laughter, I clarified. Actually, that's Kevin's, not mine. What? She looked back at the document, but Kevin hadn't yet written his name on it. Still convinced I was lying, she retorted, don't lie. I know Kevin's annual income is $200,000. This can't just be $1,000. Apparently, she believed Kevin's claim of a household income of over $200,000 when we moved. Of course, the $200,000 income was mine, but my mother-in-law was convinced it was her son's. In reality, Kevin, even as a day trader, wasn't earning much by just sitting in front of the computer for half a day trading stocks. Furthermore, I later found out that Kevin had received some money from his mother as investment capital. Therefore, she felt entitled to our care, thinking it was only natural. However, the borrowed capital, along with his spending money, never contributed a penny to our household. I became fed up with trying to convince my mother-in-law, and wondered why I was supporting these people. Get out, lying daughter-in-law. She continued yelling, her face turning red. I, on the other hand, became increasingly calm and replied, that would be great, actually. Are you sure you'll be all right, though, laughing a bit. She threw the tax return documents at me as if to say, of course, I'll be fine. I picked up the documents and, simultaneously, took out a divorce petition I had prepared earlier, placing it gently on the table. My mother-in-law looked satisfied, as if she had accomplished something. Before getting swept up in strange emotions, I hurried to find a new place and started preparing to move. Kevin, oblivious to everything, commented, it's always tough between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, huh? Implying it was all his mother's fault. I replied monotonously, yes, it is, and left the $4,000 rent apartment without saying
goodbye.
Later, I heard from industry gossip that Kevin was dumped harshly by the businesswoman he was dating, who called him all talk, and his plans for remarriage fell through. As one ages, the life they've led starts to show, and it seems Kevin's charm had worn thin. He later called me, crying, you're the only one for me. Please come back. But I replied insincerely, I can't live with your mother. Knowing his infidelity through a detective agency I had hired, I then demanded more compensation, ignoring all his desperate calls. My mother-in-law also called once, saying, I apologize for everything. Won't you come back? But remembering those hellish days, I refused flatly, saying, no way, and ended the call. Apparently, my mother-in-law had spent all her amusement money and was in deep secret debt. After my father-in-law's death, his inheritance was mostly gone to debts, leaving little behind. Kevin, unaware of these circumstances, had taken his mother in, hoping for inheritance. Seeking recognition from others, they both desired to show off by spending a lot of money. Perhaps this is what is meant by like parent, like child. The two resembling each other in their extravagant spending habits for appearance's sake. Couldn't afford the $4,000 rent and were eventually evicted. They now live in a $300 per month apartment without a bath. Kevin started working as a night security guard to pay for living expenses and compensation. My mother-in-law, struggling with food expenses, took up part-time work despite having never worked before. She caused problems due to her inexperience and kept getting fired. Meanwhile, I bought a reasonably priced one-room condominium and am now enjoying living alone. I can spend my hard-earned money as I like, without anyone to care for. And no more snide remarks about my upbringing. What a wonderful life. On my days off, I enjoy breakfast at the cafe downstairs, spend leisurely time, go to trendy restaurants with friends at night, and enjoy my favorite foods. I'm truly grateful for working hard and earning my money. You are a nuisance, so go to an institution. I don't have a mother, do I? I am Tracy Baker. I'm still in the 5th grade of elementary school, living with my father and mother. My father is very kind, and he takes me out to play even on his days off. My mother acts normal when my father is around. But she seems cold and indifferent when he's not, making it a little difficult to talk to her at times. I'm off to work. As usual, my father leaves for work early in the morning. While eating breakfast, I say,
Goodbye.
to him. Looking at the clock, I realize it's almost time for me to go to school. I hurry to finish my breakfast so I can change clothes. Thank you for the meal. After finishing, I place my dishes in the sink and head to my room to change. Wait a moment. Called by my mother, I turn around to see her pointing at the sink. Who is going to wash these? Her eyes are cold, almost angry. Normally, I would just change and go to school, but I felt like I would get scolded if I did that. I'll wash them myself. As I mutter this, she suddenly shouts, What? I can't hear you, speak up. Startled, my body tenses. Feeling guilty, I apologize. Sorry, I'll wash them myself. Of course, you should. From now on, take care of your own things. While still angry, she throws her apron on the sofa and goes to her room. Reflecting on her words, I wash the breakfast dishes and leave for school. At school, while talking with friends, the conversation turns to parents. Hearing my friends' stories, it seems like everyone's mothers are kind. And even when they get scolded, they seem to have a good relationship. What is your mother like, Tracy? Suddenly asked by a friend, I struggle to answer. But I convince myself that my mother's coldness is just a misunderstanding on my part. And that she's only in a bad mood because I haven't been taking care of my own things. So, I reply that she is very kind. My friend says, that's nice, but I feel complicated. I'm home. When I return home, my mother is not there. Thinking she might be out shopping, I start my homework in my room. Before I know it, it's dark outside, and the clock shows the usual dinner time. But my mother hasn't returned yet. Then I hear noises at the entrance and the sound of the refrigerator opening. I peek into the kitchen from my room and see my mother. Hungry, I go to the kitchen and greet her. I'm home. She replies quickly without turning around, still seeming in a bad mood. What's for dinner tonight? I ask with a smile, but this seems to upset her. Huh? Didn't I tell you to take care of yourself? Your father will be home soon, and I'm busy cooking dinner. Unable to say anything more, I start making microwave food, but then my father arrives. I'm home. Hearing his voice, my mother quickly snatches the microwave food from my hands. Confused about what to do, my father enters the kitchen. Oh. Are we just starting dinner? Seeing my kind father's face, I feel like crying. Welcome home. I was late going shopping today, so I'm just starting dinner now. Please wait a little longer, both you and Tracy. Her face softens. Not sure if she's still angry, but happy to eat the meal she's making, I feel relieved. Afterward, we have dinner as a family, and I enjoy playing games with my father. Perhaps my mother was just in a bit of a bad mood. I fall asleep thinking that if I take care of my things properly, she might not get angry anymore. From the next day, I make an effort to take care of myself. I wash the breakfast dishes and fold the laundry from the clothesline, storing them in the closet. I vacuum my room and make microwave food for myself when my mother comes home late. The thought of possibly being praised by her makes me smile. Although she hasn't praised me yet, she scolds me less often. When my father is around, we enjoy our time as a family of 3. This makes me happy. One night, I hear a groaning sound and wake up. Thinking it might be a ghost, I hide under my blanket. The groaning continues for a while, and then I hear the sound of an ambulance. The ambulance stops nearby, and soon the entrance to our house becomes noisy. Dad. I cried out as I approached him. My father was pale, sweating, and clearly in pain. Tears came to my eyes, and I clung to the paramedic, begging, "Please save my dad." The paramedic placed a hand on my head and told me they were taking him to the hospital now. Afterward, my mother and I rode in the ambulance to the hospital. Upon arrival, my father was quickly taken away. My mother and I had no choice but to wait in the designated area. I was filled with anxiety while waiting, wondering what would happen if something happened to my father, or if he disappeared. However, my mother, standing beside me, seemed unconcerned, busy with her smartphone. I cried alone, waiting for someone to tell me, everything will be okay. After an indeterminate amount of time, a doctor came to us. My mother and the doctor had a complicated conversation. All I could understand was that they found an illness in my father, and he would have to be hospitalized for a while. I should have been relieved that the worst had been avoided. But I was shocked that my father had to fight an illness, and the thought of him not being able to return home for a while. For the time being, my mother and I went back home. After preparing things for my father's hospital stay, my mother returned to the hospital. Left alone at home, I couldn't sleep even as I lay in bed. And soon it was bright outside as the early morning turned to day. School. I had to go to school, but I was not in the mood. I didn't feel like eating and just curled up in my blanket. "Aren't you going to school?" It was noon when my mother noticed. She didn't scold me for not going to school but seemed busy, perhaps needing to go to the hospital, and quickly left the house. I hadn't eaten anything since morning, so I decided to get something from the kitchen. There was some leftover, so I ate it with leftovers from last night's dinner. In the evening, my mother returned. She had bought some packed meals for me. "Eat this today. And I bought some microwave food for you to eat from tomorrow." "Okay. Thank you." Thinking I shouldn't bother my busy mother, I followed her instructions. The next morning, I ate microwave food for breakfast and went to school. My friends asked why I was absent the day before, and I lied that I felt sick. The teacher, seeming to know my situation, spoke to me kindly. When I got home, my mother was not there, probably at the hospital with my father. I wanted to see my father too. I thought about asking my mother if she could take me to see him on the next holiday. While I was doing my homework, the phone rang. I was the only one at home, so I answered. "Hello? Oh, Tracy? What are you up to?" It was my father on the phone, and I teared up hearing his voice. "Dad. Are you okay now? I want to see you." As I cried, my father spoke kindly and laughed. "Sorry to worry you. I'm all right now. I want to see you too. It'd be nice if you and Mom could come together."
Yeah.
"I'll ask Mom." "Good. Oh, is Mom there?" I was puzzled by my father's question. My mother was not at home. I had thought she was at the hospital. "Mom isn't here." "Isn't she at the hospital?" Hearing this, my father seemed to realize something and spoke evasively. Right. She just left a while ago. She'll be home soon." "Tracy, have you eaten?" "Yes. Mom bought me some microwave food." After my reply, my father went silent for a moment, then changed the topic. After talking with my father for a while, I heard the front door open, indicating my mother's return. My father asked me to pass the phone to her. I gave the phone to my newly arrived mother, who seemed a bit shaken as she talked to him. My mother smelled of cigarettes when she returned, leaving me wondering where she had been. I went back to my room. The next day, my mother asked if I wanted to go to the hospital with her. I said yes, even though she seemed hesitant, but she took me. Seeing my father for the first time in a while. He was connected to an 4, but smiled as soon as he saw me. Tracy. You came to see me. I hugged my father. I almost cried again seeing him looking well, but I was so happy to see him. After talking with my father for a while, my mother said it was time to leave, and we reluctantly left the hospital room. As I looked back, my father waved at me with a smile, telling me to come again. But I never imagined that would be our last conversation. My father's condition suddenly worsened, and he passed away quickly. I couldn't believe my father was gone. Dressed in black as my mother instructed, I went to his funeral. Many people came to say
Goodbye
to my father. Seeing my mother's detached demeanor, I thought maybe my father was still alive. While standing off to the side, someone approached me. Hey, aren't you Tracy? I turned around to see a woman who looked a bit like a fashionista standing behind me. Confused about who she was, I hesitated, but she sat down beside me. It's been so long. I'm your aunt, your father's sister. Aunt. Upon closer inspection, she does resemble my father. I don't remember her, but I have heard my father talk about his sister. Aunt. Yes, your aunt. I look like your dad, don't I? She said this with a smile, her face resembling my father's. Then, suddenly, she hugged me. It's okay to cry. You've been so strong, Tracy. I must have already been crying, and her words made me cry even more. It was like I finally understood that I would never see my father again. After the aunt comforted me, I calmed down and thanked her before going to get a drink. When I entered the room, my mother was there. And upon seeing my tear-streaked face, she said coldly, "What? You cried? What an unsightly face." Her cold words hurt. "Aren't you sad, Mom?" I blurted out to my mother, who didn't seem to be grieving at all. "There's no point in being sad. He's gone now." I shivered at my mother's cold response. Weren't we happy when it was the three of us, my father, mother, and me? Did my mother hate my father? As I stood there frozen, my aunt came over. "Oh, hello, sister. It's been a while." My mother's expression changed as my aunt spoke with a smile. "Oh, hello. It's been a while. Anything I can help with?" "No, nothing." "Come on, Tracy, let's go over there." She took my hand and led me out of the room. It was clear from my mother's face that she wasn't fond of my aunt. I stayed with my aunt, and my father's funeral ended without incident. "Tracy, we're going home." After a while, my mother came to pick me up. My aunt had been holding my hand, but she let go as we were leaving. She looked a bit sad. "Tracy, see you again."
Yeah.
"See you." Reluctantly, I followed my mother outside where an unfamiliar car was parked. "Sorry to keep you waiting." The car belonged to an acquaintance of my mother's. She opened the door, and an unknown man was in the driver's seat, which made me hesitant to get in. "Don't dawdle, get in quickly." I reluctantly got into the car, spoken to in a tone I had never heard from my mother before. The car drove in the opposite direction of our home, and I watched the passing scenery, feeling a bit scared and not knowing where we were going. "Here we are. Get out quickly. We stopped at a large building in an unfamiliar place. Mom, where is this? I asked, but my mother, lighting a cigarette, said, You are a nuisance, so go to an institution. What? Confused, I watched as the unknown man and my mother drove away. I tried to chase after the car but eventually fell and gave up. Not knowing where to go, I headed back to where I had been left when a car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down and it was my aunt driving. I never imagined it would come to this. Tracy, get in. Relieved to see my aunt, I hurried into the car. She patted my head, and I quietly cried, feeling my tension release. How many times are you going to cry today? Poor thing. We arrived at a house, seemingly my aunt's. I followed her inside, and a man's voice greeted us warmly. I instinctively hid behind my aunt, but she laughed and reassured me it was okay. I peeked out to see a young man smiling at me. Sorry. Surprised you, right? I'm this lady's husband, your uncle, I guess. He reached out for a handshake. His kind face reassured me, and as I shook his hand, he smiled again. Hungry, right? Dinner's ready. You need to eat a lot to grow. Oh, be quiet. What are you, her mother? Hearing their playful conversation, I couldn't help but laugh. My stomach growled, making me blush and them laugh heartily. For the first time in a while, I enjoyed a pleasant meal. After dinner, they let me take a bath and prepared pajamas for me. They invited me to the living room, where hot milk was waiting. Hot milk? Aren't you a bit old for that, Tracy? What? Don't elementary school kids like hot milk? No. I laughed at their banter, feeling comfortable in their presence. They both laughed too, then asked me to sit down for a talk. Hey, Tracy, how about becoming our child? I was about to drink the hot milk and choked on her words. Cough. Cough. What? Oh, sorry. That was sudden, huh? He patted my back while my aunt laughed heartily. Become our child, Tracy. Do you really want to go back to a mother like that? I found myself deep in thought at my aunt's words. I don't hate my mother. But when I think about everything that happened at home, about my father, and being left behind, I honestly feel scared to go back to my mother. Actually, we heard about you from your dad. What? I was surprised to hear my father's name. Then my aunt explained everything in detail. The man my mother was with was her affair partner. And it seemed my father had known about the affair. He was very worried about me, as his illness got worse and he thought he might not have long left. He asked my aunt and uncle to take care of me after he was gone. Hearing this, I couldn't stop crying, longing to see my father again. Your dad loved and cared for you so much. Her hand, patting my back, was warm, and in my heart, I repeatedly thanked my father. My beloved father who always played with me. I thought to myself that I wanted to be strong for my father. I want to stay with you and uncle. My aunt and uncle were delighted when I said this. It seemed that various procedures were necessary for me to stay with them, which would take some time, but they told me not to worry and that I could stay with them. I decided to do my best to help my aunt and uncle. I helped with breakfast and dinner, and even cleaning the bathroom and toilet, which made them worry about me. They told me to play like a normal elementary school student. So I decided to do my homework for the time being. Tracy, did you always do housework at home? My aunt asked me this during dinner. I nodded, and my uncle, sitting next to me, hugged me. You've had it tough for an elementary school student. Well, helping out is normal, but you seem to be overdoing it, like you're forcing yourself. Indeed, I might have been pushing myself too hard trying to be praised by my mother. Realizing something I hadn't been aware of, I fell silent. The effort I made that was never praised. It probably didn't matter to my mother. You don't have to worry about anything here. You can help out. But the most important things you should focus on are your friends, school, and yourself. Take care of yourself properly. Her words deeply resonated with me. My uncle, tearing up, nodded repeatedly. I felt so happy to be with my aunt and uncle. 2 weeks after my father's funeral, I was called to the staff room by my school teacher. Wondering what it was about, I was told that my mother had called. The teachers probably didn't know the details of my situation. Thinking that not answering would trouble them, I picked up the phone with trembling hands. Hello. Tracy. Answer the phone quickly. Hearing my mother's voice for the first time in a while, it was still a shouting tone. Where are you right now? You're not at the institution I left you at. Unable to speak, I remained silent. Are you listening? Well, never mind. I'm coming to pick you up. I'll get some money for doing so. Mama is having financial troubles now. Hearing her words, I felt my emotions grow cold. To think I wanted love from such a person, sought praise from her, and that my father was betrayed by her, made me unbearably frustrated. Now I have my aunt and uncle. I have a precious place. And my beloved father watching over me. I can become strong. I don't have a mom, do I? Before I knew it, I had said that to my mother. Huh? What are you talking about? You must be mistaken.
Goodbye.
Then. Wait I hung up the phone on my own. The teacher next to me, surprised, asked if that wasn't my mother, and I replied it was a stranger. This call was treated as a suspicious call, and a warning was issued at school. Thinking my mother might come at dismissal time, I called my aunt from the school's public phone. My aunt said she would come right away, and she did. She explained the situation to the school teacher, and they contacted the Child Consultation Center. After I went home, my mother did come to pick me up. But the teachers dealt with her, and she left with a bitter expression. After that, my mother never barged into the school again, but as a precaution, my aunt or uncle would pick me up before dismissal time. I felt sorry, but my aunt and uncle told me not to worry and smiled. Thanks to them, I'm living happy days. The teachers at school look out for me, and I feel happy knowing I have so many allies around me. Then one day, the phone rang at home. Lately, I've been answering calls at my aunt and uncle's house, so I picked up as usual. Hello. The voice I heard was one I didn't want to hear. Oh, Tracy? So you were there after all. I froze, immediately recognizing it was my mother. Why did she know I was here? No one should have told her. Stop staying there and come back. Things are tough over here. I stayed silent as my mother spoke one-sidedly. According to my mother, her affair partner's company went bankrupt and they were out of money. Apparently, she could receive government benefits if I lived with her. And she needed that to survive. She said she was in a de facto marriage with her affair partner, but was considering leaving him if they couldn't make ends meet. I couldn't really understand all this, all I grasped was that I was needed for the money. She must have been really out of money to say such things when she called the school. As I stayed silent on the phone, my mother began to get more and more irritated. While being yelled at, suddenly the phone was taken from me. Surprised, I turned around to see my aunt, who gave me a reassuring smile. But in the next moment, her face turned fierce. Say something at least. Are you listening? Stop yelling. We can hear you loud and clear without the screaming. What? The voice of my mother over the phone suddenly went silent. My heart was pounding. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? Asking your daughter to come back just for money? Ridiculous. What do you think Tracy is? That's none of your business. Tracy is my daughter. Give her back. Who left that daughter in front of a facility? Don't talk such nonsense. I'll call the police. Claiming she's been kidnapped. Go ahead, say it. We have evidence of the terrible things you've done to Tracy. In fact, I'd prefer it if you called the police, it might resolve things quicker. What did you say? As I listened to their argument, I felt like I was causing trouble and got a bit down. At that moment, my uncle, who had returned at some point, patted my head. Don't worry. Leave it to us. This is where the adults step in. He then took my hand and made me more hot milk. You like hot milk, right, Tracy? You drink quite a bit of it.
Yeah.
I thought it was delicious the first time I tried it, so I like it. Hearing this, my uncle smiled happily. After a while, my aunt came back to the living room. Noticing my concerned look, she tousled my hair. Why that face? There's nothing to worry about. She's no match for me. I straightened my hair and thanked my aunt, then helped with dinner preparation. Since coming to live with my aunt and uncle, I've realized how enjoyable helping out can be. A few days later, when the phone rang again, it was my mother. Although my aunt and uncle had told me I didn't need to answer her calls anymore, I wanted to help them in any way I could. Tracy? Mom really needs your help. As I said before, I don't have a mother. What an ungrateful child. Didn't I raise you? Have you forgotten the happy days we spent together with your dad? Hearing the word dad made me feel both a jolt and irritation. When I had a dad, it was very fun. But the kind one was only dad. Mom, you abandoned me. I was surprised by my own loud voice. But it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. From then on, I talked back to whatever she said. You're still my child. I didn't abandon you, I just left you there temporarily. You said I was a nuisance and to go to an institution, laughing. That's not what a mother does. I was forced to say that. It's not my fault. But you still abandoned me. So, I don't have a mother. If I have a mother, it's my aunt. And if I have a dad, it's my uncle and my dad who went to heaven. You're brainwashed. Just come back already. Realizing I was crying while arguing with her, I felt surprisingly light. As if I had been holding back a lot. At least, let me live with you at your current place. I can't even eat without you. No way. Don't bother the people I love. I felt someone's presence and turned around to see my aunt and uncle standing there. My aunt patted my head and praised me for speaking up. My uncle was almost in tears, nodding in agreement. Then my aunt took over the phone call, seemingly pleased with something. My uncle told me he was happy to hear me call him dad. I'm grateful to be called your dad. I had said it impulsively, but if they were happy, maybe it was okay for me to think that way too. I felt happy myself. After that, there were no more calls from my mother, probably thanks to my aunt and uncle. Once I got used to living with my aunt and uncle, my aunt bought me a smartphone. I was thrilled to have my first phone and exchanged contact information with my friends. Enjoying life more than ever. Then, one day, the house phone rang unusually. Since the incident with my mother, the school had been contacting my aunt and uncle's cell phones. And I had my own phone for calls from friends. Wondering who it could be, I answered the phone. Hello. Contrary to my high spirits, the person on the other end sounded very low. Hello. It's me. At first, I didn't recognize who it was, thinking it might be a wrong number. I've been told at school not to talk to strangers, so I was about to hang up. It's Mom. You've forgotten my voice. What? Oh. Once she said that, I listened more carefully and recognized it was indeed my mother's voice, which had lost its usual vigor to the point of being unrecognizable. "You're in 6th grade now, aren't you?" "There's no one here right now." As I said that, my mother started crying. Unable to decide what to do, I pondered my options. "Actually, Mom, I'm in the hospital. I got sick." "What?" Hearing about her illness reminded me of my father. Now, thinking of him doesn't make me sad. Instead, remembering him cheers me up, as he left me with many good memories. "There's no one to take care of me. Could you come and look after me? And the hospital bills. I can't pay them. Maybe you could ask your aunt to help." "Say something, will you? Why do I, a stranger, have to take care of you?" "What? I refuse to pay for the hospital and I won't ask my aunt." "You. Stop being so unreasonable. Don't get ahead of yourself." She seemed too energetic for a sick person. I wasn't disturbed by the news of her illness, unlike when my father was sick. My feelings for her have truly cooled. No matter what she says, I don't feel scared anymore. But that doesn't mean I want to argue with her. I just pity her. I hope I never become like her as I grow up. My response to her was colder than I ever imagined I could be. I got a smartphone. We hardly use the house phone anymore, so it might be gone soon. "So, this is really
Goodbye."
My mother started to panic. "Don't say that. Please. Can I have your smartphone number then?" "No. There's really no one to take care of me. No one to help with the bills." "Then I'll let someone know who might be willing to take care of you." My mother seemed to misunderstand my words and sounded hopeful. Hearing her expectant voice made me sigh. I asked for the hospital's name and then hung up. I immediately called my aunt. After explaining what happened, she was concerned for me but praised me for handling the situation well. When I made a request, my aunt agreed and quickly contacted someone. Just as I told my mother, I reached out to someone who might take care of her. A few days later, I noticed the house phone ringing incessantly. It was probably my mother, so I chose not to answer. The phone continued to ring into the night, even after my aunt and uncle returned. Upon informing my aunt, she sighed and answered the call. As expected, it was my mother, insisting on speaking with me. My aunt refused. I could hear my mother's voice over the phone, panicked about her brother coming, questioning why her brother was contacted. The person I asked my aunt to contact was my mother's brother. I remembered my mother once saying she couldn't stand her own brother. He's a stubborn man, big on duty and emotions, and would never condone her affair. Upon hearing from my aunt, he was furious and said he'd come right away. Their reunion after years was a disaster, turning my mother's anger towards us. My aunt, usually the one to handle such things, was replaced by my uncle, to my surprise. He's usually very gentle, so I wondered if he could handle my mother. But as soon as he took the phone, he became fierce. "You know, he's scarier than me when he's angry," she whispered to me. "Enough of this nonsense. If you want to talk so badly, I'll come there. I'll make you apologize to Tracy, right in front of her. Sick or not, be prepared." After my uncle yelled, my mother gasped and hung up. Oh, she hung up. After the call ended, my uncle was back to his usual smiling self. It's true what they say, the ones who rarely get angry are the scariest when they do. Later, I learned my mother was taken to her brother's house. Her illness was not severe and she was discharged soon. At her brother's farm, she reluctantly helps with the farm work, as she can't afford her lavish lifestyle anymore. She now wears hand-me-downs from the villagers instead of her branded clothes. As for me, I officially became the child of my aunt and uncle. We celebrated with a big party, and I laughed more than ever before. And to my joy, I found out I'm getting a younger brother or sister next year. I cherish my new family and am determined to always hold them dear.